Nev Stanziel, and I'm a junior.
I'm Haley Shawn. I'm a junior.
And
Meet you both.
thank you for coming in today to talk to us, and thank you for your
Absolutely.
service. So, first, let's get some background. How old were you when you were serving? How long did you serve?
I graduated high school in 1964, and so I went to college for 2 years, flunked out, and when I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I was 20 years old, so I was a little older than the average younger kid who was going to Vietnam. And I actually turned 21 in boot camp, so by the time I got to Vietnam, I was already 21. That's the answer to that. The short answer.
Yeah.
So, you weren't drafted. Were you drafted?
No, I wasn't. I went to Notre Dame High School in West Haven. I was a football player, a 2-year starter, captain my senior year, and I didn't care about my grades at all. My SATs were really good. My grades were not, and I was literally supposed to go to Cheshire Academy for a year and then go to Vermont and play football. My father graduated from Notre Dame in South Bend, and he encouraged me to apply. I didn't because I knew I wouldn't get in, but he applied for me, and I got accepted. And so I went to South Bend for 2 years. And when I flunked out in June of 1966 and hitchhiked home from South Bend, and my mother was there when I got home. I hitchhiked through the night, and my dad was at work, and my mother said, "How were your exams?" And I said, "I think they were pretty good," but that wasn't true. And then my dad came home that night, and it was like everything was normal. And then 2 weeks later, they got a letter from South Bend saying I was done. And my father said, "God damn it, you're going to get drafted now. That's what's going to happen to you, because if you weren't in school, then you potentially could be drafted." And I knew I never would have been. I had a knee injury after my junior year in football season, and I was in a cast for 8 weeks, so I never would have been drafted. But in the fall of '66, when everybody else was in college, all my friends and my roommates were back on campuses, I went down and saw a Marine Corps recruiter. No one forced me to go. No one even knew I was doing it. And that's how I got in service.
So, as far as your experience in Vietnam, where were you located throughout your time?
I was in the northern part of what was called South Vietnam. I arrived in Vietnam on September 20th, 1967, and I came home on the 4th of October of 1968. I served in an infantry company, and I was always within 10 or 11 miles of the demilitarized zone. And a significant memory portion of my time, I was at the siege of Quezon. I was on one of the hills, and I was an artillery fort observer. So that's where I was. I was up at that part of the country, the divide between North and South. And the Marine Corps tours were 13 months, and that's because the Army, Navy, and the Air Force were doing 12. And if those guys are doing 12, then the Marines are going to do 13. That's just the way they do it. That's how they operate.
So, as part of the Marines, what was your kind of role in everything?
So I went boot camp and finished boot camp, and everybody in the Marine Corps who finishes boot camp then goes to like a generic infantry course. Everybody goes through that, and then when you finish that, generally you go home on leave for 10 days, and then you get assigned. Then you go to where you've been assigned, and if you're an infantryman, you go back to Lejeune for real training, infantry training. But if you're a radar operator, you're going to go to California. And in my case, I went to the Naval Gunfire School in Coronado, California, and I learned to control and adjust naval gunfire. But when I got to Vietnam, in that fall of '67, I was assigned as an artillery fort observer in an infantry company. And there's only one fort observer. His job is to, when you get in trouble, locate where the trouble is, figure that out on a map by coordinates, and then take a compass reading and call that data in. And then when the rounds hit, you just adjust them, left 200, add 100, fire for effect or whatever. So that's the job I had. And it was an officer's job, but there was a shortage of officers. So I was a PFC when I first got there, and that's the job they gave me. And my radar operator was a corporal. So we operated we were like just the two of us. We were like freelancers because I had officers' responsibilities. I didn't have to do things that some of the enlisted guys had to do, the boring stuff like, stringing barbed wire and planting mines and stuff like that. I didn't have to do any of that.
Did you like your job?
I did. I did like it. I liked the fact that no one messed with us in terms of we had to do other things. But I also, when you get in trouble and we say you get ambushed or there's mortars come in, if people get wounded, the Marines yell for corpsman up, because they don't have medics, they have corpsmen. And the other thing you hear is FO up. They want the FO to move up towards the front and be able to determine where the trouble's coming from. So you have to stick your head up and move around when a lot of times other people don't.
What about your contact with family and friends through your times of service?
My best friend from high school lived right down the street here in Hamden, not far from where I live in Cheshire. And I wrote him at least 120 letters, and he saved every one of them. And I wrote to my parents, and I wrote to other friends as well. But he saved every one, so I have those letters. And people were good about writing to me. That was our only contact. Obviously, there was no email in those days, and no getting on your phone or going to a center and being able to communicate. I really was on my own in the sense I had no real. The only time I knew, it was at Christmas time. We were at Quezon, but the siege hadn't started, and it was Christmas morning. It was 12 o'clock, and we came out of our bunker tent, and there was a helicopter flying around with Santas painted on the noses and packages, and it landed, and then a chaplain got out. And if you wanted to, you could go to this open space and go to have Christmas Mass. And I went, and I knew 12 o'clock there was 12 midnight in New Haven, Connecticut, Christmas Eve, and my parents and my brothers and sisters were all at St. Mary's Church in New Haven. It's the only time I knew exactly where they all were when I was there.
Yeah. Are you
Sure.
still in touch with the people that you serve?
I am in touch with a number of Quezon veterans, and any veteran organization, no matter when it starts, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, it's a diminishing club because you're going to age and people are going to pass away. And so I don't belong to like the 26th Marines or the 3rd Marine Division. I only belong to the Quezon veterans, and we have a reunion every year. And there were 3 guys who used to be with me on that hill, and I knew 2 of them and learned about the 3rd, and they've since all passed away. But I've got to meet other guys, and it's as I say, it's an organization that's narrowing down, but it's still great. And I see those guys. I didn't go last year because of the pandemic, but we do see each other. It's a good time to get together.
I'm just going to ask one more question to wrap it up. What was the biggest challenge that you experienced during the war? Tricky one.
I guess sometimes the challenges are there when you don't realize the challenge and you end up doing it. I'll give you a quick example. I may mention this when I do the presentation at this high school here coming up. But I went from the last week of November in '67, just after Thanksgiving, and took a field shower. And I didn't wash again until the last week of April in 1968. I never saw soap or water from that time. Now, that's not a record. POWs go for years. But for me, it was. I think the biggest challenge was adjusting pretty quickly to seeing people get killed on both sides, because it alters your perspective once that happens, particularly when they're your own. But the first casualties I ever saw were people that were hit by artillery that I had called in. But they were the bad guys, But then later on, they were friends. And when I go to the wall, there's 28 names I look for, 28 friends of mine who were killed there.
Well, we want to thank you for your time today, and we want to thank you for your service.
Well, good luck with the rest of your program here today, and good luck.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.